Test. Oh, okay. Happy Labor Day, guys. Happy Labor Day to you. Good morning, everybody. How are you doing? Good morning, JD, Phil, BJ, Belka, Jenna, Mr. Sai to Fly, B Murph, Joe, Jason, Chen, Finbar. Good morning, Paul. Look at us laboring on Labor Day. I know, what's up with that? Good morning, Alex. Glad to be spending Labor Day morning with you guys. Good morning, Hash Brown Swag. That's a funny name. Foreign Wanderer, morning, my guy. Morning to you as well. At least not going to work today. Hey, that's nice. That's nice. So you're here, learn a little bit about cars. It's not too bad. Good morning, Jimelino. Happy you're here. Happy you're here. Today, we're going to start talking about power, torque, Are any of you guys on a cell phone right now, just chilling on a lake somewhere this Labor Day? You're in a kayak, out in the wilderness. Are we gonna finish the example? Oh, yeah, shoot. Good call, Phil. Before we get into that, we have an example we have to finish. It involves a guy named Baxter. Thanks for reminding me. I totally would have, I totally forgot about that. We gotta finish that. There's almost a storm outside. Yeah, that's true. It's not the nicest day per se. I took a nice little walk this morning though. It was sprinkling just a little, and not too much though. Storms are exciting, yeah. I like being outside when it's got a nice little breeze, but it's not super cold. Maybe there's some mist in the air. Okay, let's get started. A walk? What is that? Yeah, walk. I did it. Okay. Let's finish this example on the unicycle. Okay. So the point of this example is homework 2 gonna drop tonight? Yes, it is. I'm gonna drop it after this class. So pretty soon after this class. It'll be due Wednesday next week. So I'm thinking of, originally I planned on having homework go from Monday to Monday, right? But I think what I'm going to do is assign homeworks on Mondays still, but have them due on Wednesday. So there'll be like a little bit of overlap. How long compared to homework 1? It's, in my opinion, it's about the same, maybe a little longer. Yeah, so I'm going to give you guys a little more time on the homeworks. I got some emails over the weekend, but usually I'm not going to be as available for email over the weekend. And that's why I'm kind of extending it into the following week a little bit so that I can get to your questions Monday and Tuesday. So that just gives a little more time. Okay. So, actually, this is nice to lead into torque and power, because in this example, we're assuming that Baxter here can produce a constant torque of 8 newtons per meter as he tries to race 100 meters down this track. So what we were setting up last time is the equation of motion for this unicycle. So just to quickly recap, you start with a free body diagram. And so we had the overall body, which includes Baxter and his unicycle. And so the only forces coming into this system are the friction force at the road interface, and then we have the weight and the normal force. The normal force, once again, to prevent him from clipping through the floor. And we also did a free body diagram on the tire, and this is going to give us a relationship that lets us solve for this friction force. So I don't know what was happening here. Looks like the unicycle is bleeding. We were discussing something last time. That's okay. So we got these equations. We have this sum of forces. The mass times the acceleration is the friction force. We do the sum of moments on the tire. The inertia times the angular acceleration is the torque, but the friction is fighting that torque a little bit. And then we have this rolling constraint. Yes, Baxter bled out. He won his race, expended all his energy, and then he died a lonely death. Okay, so we're going to sub equation 3 into equation 2. So what I'm going to substitute from equation 3, I'm going to have the angular acceleration is the linear acceleration divided by r. And then I'm going to sub this theta double dot expression into equation 2. So we're going to have the moment of inertia times x double dot over r is the torque minus this friction force times the radius of the tire, which was half a meter. All right. Now, if you look at equation 1 up here at the top, I'm going to solve for the friction force from that equation. So that's easy to do. I just got oh wait, it's already solved. No, I want to solve for the acceleration. Because then this will let me get an expression for the friction force. That's what I wanted to do. So the acceleration is that friction force, which is the tractive force, divided by m. Friction force and tractive force are kind of interchangeable here. Okay, and then I want to substitute this acceleration expression in right here. So let's do that. I times the friction force over m times r is torque minus the friction force times r. And then we're going to solve for the friction force here. And it'll be in terms of the torque that our friend Baxter is applying. And that's kind of the relationship I wanted to show here. How torque at the pedals ultimately translates to tractive force at the road. Okay, so we're going to go like up here. So the friction force, if you go through the work, it's going to be the torque times the radius of the tire plus the inertia of the tire over the total mass times r. And if we substitute in, all of our numbers, So we had like 8 Newton meters of torque, the radius was half a meter, the inertia 0.625 kilograms, blah, 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 blah. So we're gonna sub that in. And we're gonna get a constant 15.45 newtons. All right. Now, given that he's producing this force the whole length of the race, let us figure out how long it takes him to finish that 100 meters. So I'm going to go back to equation 1, because now that I know the friction force, I can solve for the acceleration. So mass times acceleration is the friction force. So I got 70 kilograms between Baxter and his bicycle, times the acceleration is 15.45 newtons. So the acceleration is 0.22 meters per second squared. And then from here, we can go back to our constant acceleration kinematic relationships. So from this constant acceleration, I know the position. If I start from rest, it's going to be 1/2 times 0.22 meters per second squared, 1/2 times the acceleration times t squared. And then we know the end of the race, he's going for 100 meters, so we can solve for the time that it takes him to get to the end. So it's the square root of 2 times 100 meters over 0.22 meters per second squared. Let's say this is the final time TF. 30.2 seconds. I actually watched a couple YouTube videos of unicycle racing the other day. There's one guy who did a 1/4 mile, I believe, on a unicycle. He was going around like a track at some high school or something, and he finished it in just under a minute. So if you think about that, Baxter's actually going pretty slow in this example. I'm going to re-engineer this example so that he's working a little harder next time. Because 30 seconds for 100 meters is apparently not that impressive. Okay. So just to clarify, the friction force is the tractive force in this example. That's exactly right, Finbar. So tractive force for a road vehicle, it is the friction force between the tire and the road. So that could refer to accelerating. Tractive force can accelerate you, and tractive force is also required to brake. Even though usually when we refer to tractive force, we're talking about not braking, but getting some grip to move forward down the track. So yes, tractive force is caused by friction, and okay, the major takeaway from this problem. You're very welcome. The major takeaway, I would say, is this. Comes from this equation that, so here's the takeaway. Tractive force, and remember, we're trying to maximize acceleration. To maximize acceleration, we have to maximize tractive force. Tractive force is proportional to the torque. Tractive force is proportional to the torque. So now we're starting to talk about, if I want to maximize acceleration, I got to maximize force. Well, that force initiates from torque. Now on a bicycle, the human produces the torque. When we're talking about cars, it's going to be the engine that originates this torque. So that's a good segue into the next set of notes. Maybe put a box around this. Boom. All right, and I'm going to throw these notes up right after class. So if you miss something in here, you'll be able to fill that in. I'm probably going to start uploading the incompleted notes because, like, let's say I only get halfway through this. I'm going to try to finish this. I think I'll just upload an incomplete one, and then I'll come back later and do the finished one. So you'll get the notes after each class. That's what I think I'm going to do. Okay, so let's get into it. In our pursuit of the goal to get from A to B as fast as possible, that's our goal for this class, we need to maximize tractive force to maximize acceleration. All right. Now, in a road vehicle, the power to create this tractive force originates with the engine, or if we're talking about a Tesla, it originates with an electric motor or a couple electric motors. If the torque were too large, would it be slippery? Yes, we'll talk about this. I mean, you can generate so much torque that it overwhelms the ability of the tire to grip the road. So it exceeds the local friction coefficient there, and then you'll just spin out your tires. So it gets more complicated, but keep the principle in mind. As much torque as possible is generally faster. And this power, if we're talking about bicycles, which we're doing some bicycle examples because I think it's a little more intuitive maybe than a car. You generate that power from your own body by pumping the legs. So this power that we generate produces torque. And we know torque is proportional to the tractive force. And this torque accelerates rotating members of the vehicle. We'll get into that probably Wednesday, like how it rotates the drive shaft, the gears, whatever. And ultimately, this rotation produces a tractive force at the tires, as we saw with Baxter. He rotated the pedals, and that produced a tractive force at the road. Okay, so however, we're going to find out that engines, motors, and cyclists, they only produce torque and power effectively over a limited band of rotational speeds. So in the example, and we'll revisit this example, we assumed that Baxter was producing a constant torque for the whole race. And, as the race continues, he's pedaling faster and faster because he's building speed. But he's producing the same torque the whole time, and that's not really realistic. And because we can't produce torque effectively over all speeds, whether we're talking about engines, whatever, this is where gears are going to come in and save the day. But that's a topic for Wednesday when we talk about gears specifically. All right. So let's talk about what power, torque, angular velocity is. What's the relationship? So we're going to talk about power. It's the time derivative of work. So if you have the handout, you can fill this along with me. And we know that the units of work, let me check my cheat sheet to make sure I got all this. Okay. Work is joules. Time is seconds. Joules per second. So joules, that's also Newton meter per second. Like work is a force over a distance. So, and in SI units, we call this the watt. So unit of power is a watt. But when we talk about cars, what is horsepower? Because that gets thrown around a lot. So it's just another unit of power, like watts. So it's just power, it's just a different unit. So let's break it down a little bit. By definition, 1 horsepower lifts a weight of 550 pound force, a height of 1 foot, over a time of 1 second. So I made a little picture here. So this weighs 550 pounds. We're lifting at a distance of 1 foot, and we're doing that by, pulling over here. Maybe it's a horse pulling it. And if we do that over 1 second, we've done 1 horsepower of work. So if we dissect this image here, the work that is done is mgh, so the mass times gravity, that's the weight, 550 pounds, and we lift at a height, h, which is 1 foot, and we do it over, well, I'll just put time here again, but it's 1 second. So if I put 550 pound force, that's the weight, I lift at a height 1 foot, I do it over 1 second, that's 1 horsepower. So this is expressing 1 horsepower in units of pound-feet over time. But let's convert this to SI units so that we can get a relationship between watts and horsepower. So SI is the International System of Units, although we're a little stubborn about this, it seems, and it hasn't been adopted everywhere internationally. Okay, so let's take this image, put it in SI units. So 1 foot is 0.305 meters, and 550 pound force, well, that would be like lifting a mass of 249.5 kilograms. So if I do this same exercise of saying power is the work over time, let's do that. 249.5 kilograms is the mass, times G, 9.81 meters per second squared. That would be the weight in newtons. And then we multiply that by the height that we lift this mass, or the horse lifts it, and we put it over 1 second. So that's in SI units. If you multiply that all out, this is approximately 746 watts. So if you're producing 1 horsepower, that's 746 watts of power, or 0.74 kilowatts. All right, so that's horsepower. What is the relationship between power and torque? So the work done by a torque acting on some body, so it could be a cyclist doing work on the unicycle by acting on the pedals, or an engine doing work, about the crankshaft. So the work would be the torque acting over an angular distance. So torque multiplied by the angular distance over which it acts. So think about translational work. It's force over a distance. So work done by a torque is very similar. It's torque over an angular distance. So the units work out for this. So Newton meter, times radian, which is dimensionless, and I have an example about this later to show you why it's dimensionless. So power is the rate at which work is done. So that's going to be work over time. We can break it down this way. So a torque and the rate over which it's doing work. So now we have Newton meters times radians per second. So we have power is a torque multiplied by an angular velocity. But this brings up the question of the radian. Okay. So what about this radian here? This radians per second? Because up above I said that power was Newton meters over second, so joules per second or watts. I didn't say it was newtons times meters times radian per second. So okay. So like I said, the answer here is radians are dimensionless, but why? And what does that mean? Radians are dimensionless, so just pretend it's not there. Okay? Okay, let's explain why. Why is a radian dimensionless? It is the angle, so it's a measure for an angle, but how is it measured? A radian is the angle subtended by a circular arc as measured by, and we'll break down what this means, like subtended and whatever. But it's a radian is the length of arc subtended by angle divided by the radius of the arc. Arc length, radius, same unit. Yep. So like this length of the arc, that's meters. The radius of the arc will also be meters, or whatever length unit you choose, but those length units are going to cancel out. And so it'll be dimensionless. So this will make more sense when we show an example. So let's consider a 90-degree angle. We know in radians, 90 degrees is pi over 2, right? So let's show how it gets broken down. So here's the angle in here, theta. Now this circle, this arc is a circular arc. That's why I drew the rest of the circle here so you can see it's got a circular shape. But this is the arc subtended by the angle. So it's like, I guess if you draw from the angle like some lines projecting out, if you connect those two lines with a shape, that shape is subtending the angle. So this is a special case where the angle is subtended by a circular arc, not some other shape. So let's get the length of this arc. We know that it'll be, well, if we did the whole circle, that would be the circumference, which is 2 pi r. But this is only a quarter of the circle, so it's 1/4 of the circumference, right? So that's the length of the arc of the circular arc that subtends this angle. And we divide it by the radius of the arc, and this circle has radius r. So you're going to see, you see what's happening, don't you? The r's cancel, and you're left with, what? Pi over 2. And the units are meters over meters, and those cancel. So when we say radians, it makes it sound like it's a unit, but really it's just like an idea that describes an angle. I mean, life is just a dream, right? Okay. So all that to say, just because we have power, which is torque times an angular velocity, really it's just energy over time. Now I want to show you something here. Because when we talk about cars, there's a conversion that we typically get into, which is you have your engine power and horsepower. That's popular. You have your torque in pound-feet, and then you talk about the engine speed in RPM. So when people are talking about the performance of a vehicle, they might be like, oh, it produces 600 pound-feet of torque at wait, is it foot-pound or pound-feet when you talk about torque? I know it's particular. I'm gonna Google this real quick. I don't want to mess this up. It's foot-pound. Wait, you guys just contradicted each other. And pound-feet or foot-pound? Foot-pound. Yeah, I think it's foot-pound. Hank, what happened? Wait, you're wrong? Pound-feet? Wait, hold on. Are you guys sure? It's pound-feet? Pound-feet, we should do a vote. Are they interchangeable? Okay, let's see. You guys are saying pound-feet. They tripped me up. I've heard both. It's foot-pound. Newton meter is pound-feet. I mean, like, you could say it's the same. You know, it's a foot times a pound. But, like, people are really particular about what it is. Because, like, one we use as a unit of power. And one we tend to use for torque. I feel like you write pound-feet, but you say foot. So you write it one way and say it another. Let me pull up my dyno sheet. Yeah, okay, give us the final word on that, Hank. I'd appreciate it. Okay, so anyways, the point is, on these spec sheets, they'll tell you, okay, produces this much torque at this engine RPM. And anyways, you can convert that to horsepower. That's a popular thing to do. So let's talk about how you break it down. I heard people say foot-pound just because it sounds more natural, but pound-feet is correct. Okay. Okay, cool. Just know that some people are very particular. They write articles about this. Foot-pound on the sheet. Okay. So maybe okay. Maybe I'll go back and change this. I don't know. Okay, so 1 horsepower has to be pound-feet because we say Newton meter. I don't know if it like that sounds reasonable, but I just don't know if the world works that way. So this is the definition of horsepower. We said that up above. It's 550, right? But let's break this down into RPM. So I'm going to say 500 what am I doing? 500 pound force times feet times, now watch what I'm doing here. I'm taking this times radian per second. Because I know radian's dimensionless. So now I have a torque times an angular velocity. So that's what I did here. Car and driver uses pound feet. Car and driver's reliable. They're gearheads. Okay, so we're going to convert this radians per second into RPM though. So 2 pi radians is 1 rotation. And then we know that 60 seconds is 1 minute. So these units are going to cancel, or when you multiply it all out, this is going to be 5252, and I'm just sticking with pound feet here, times RPM. So 1 horsepower is 5252 pound feet of torque times 1 RPM. So let's do an example here to show how you would typically use this conversion. All right, so the question is, if my engine produces 650, okay, I found that pound feet is unit for torque and foot pound is unit for work. See, that's what I'm talking about, Paul. There's something going on there. So we'll keep using pound feet. So if my engine produces 650 pound feet of torque at an angular velocity of 4,000 RPM, so my engine is spinning the engine shaft at 4,000 rotations per minute, producing this much torque. What is the power in horsepower at that engine speed? Pound feet wins again. Yes, it does. Okay, so let's work this out. So I know that. Why do I put a little f on the bottom of your pound? To drive home that it's pound force, not pound mass. That's why I do it. Pound. So the F is for force. So let's calculate the power. So power is this slug the same as pound mass, Finbar? can't remember off the top. That always gets a little confusing, this pound mass, pound force, and slug thing. Okay, so let's get the power. 600. We know it's torque times angular velocity times 4,000 RPM. And if you multiply this out, we're producing this much power. 2,600,000 pound force times feet times RPM. All right, so just once again, power is torque times angular velocity, and it produces this. 2,600,000, blah, 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 blah. But we know from up above that, interesting, so car and driver uses pound feet, but mine and every dyno sheet looked at says foot pound. So it I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you. Okay. But using this up above, oops, let's go back to this color. 2,600,000 pound feet times RPM. Well, we know that there's 5252 pound feet times RPM in 1 horsepower. So basically I have to take this number and divide it by 5252, and that's going to give me 495 horsepower. So if you use this formula a couple times, they give you just like a pocket formula. If you want to figure out horsepower, you take your torque in pound feet, you multiply it by your RPM, you divide it by 5252, and that gives you your horsepower. This is the pop soda debate of engineering. Yeah, I think I say soda, by the way. I'm from Arizona, so I don't know if that's do you guys say soda? Who says pop? Like, I feel like people from Minnesota would say pop. Okay, you thought we were done with Baxter? Well, there he is. He's back. Apparently, he didn't bleed out at the bottom of the last set of notes. If you're from Buffalo, you say pop. It's a Buffalo thing? Okay. Pop hurts to say. Pop! It does take a lot of work. Okay. So let's talk about Baxter again. I think this is the last time we're going to see Baxter, so don't... Okay. Oh, I just realized I didn't... So we assumed that Baxter produced a constant... Actually, I think we said he produced 8 Newton meters of torque. But because I wrote 12 here, we're just going to go with it. I guess he got stronger in the interim in the past couple minutes. So... okay, really, it should be 8. Whatever. So he produced this much acceleration constantly. Now, we didn't calculate this at the end, but obviously, if he started from rest, his pedaling speed was 0 RPM. If you went back to the example, by the end of the race, his pedaling speed gets up to 127 RPM, which is doable on a unicycle or any bicycle. We'll see some stats later on. But at the end of the race, the angular velocity of the pedals, or rather, the angular velocity of the pedals over time is this linear function. So, big gains for Baxter, that's right. So, from our equation of motion, if you were tracking how fast he's pedaling over time, well, he's linearly pedaling faster and faster and faster until the end of the race if he produces a constant torque. And that makes sense because its constant acceleration produces a linear increase in torque. So if we talk about the power that Baxter was producing, torque times angular velocity. I know I have the wrong figure here. It really was 8 newtons per meter, but I'm assuming he got a little stronger, whatever. So anyways, you'll find that the power is also a linearly increasing function over this rate. So in order to maintain constant torque, Baxter has to increase his power over the duration of the race, like a Super Saiyan. So let's put this in a graphical representation here. Let's plot the power of Baxter as a function of time during this race. Okay, so unlimited power. I know. Good old Palpatine. Okay, so the torque is this red line, and I just said it's 12 Newton meters over the Baxter is the Senate. So this is the start of the race. He starts at 0 RPM. By the end of the race, he gets up to like 127 RPM. Do it. And constant torque. Now, power is angular velocity times torque. So we see that the power linearly increasing. And really, if we maintained this assumption of constant torque and we let Baxter just race all day, his power would just increase without end, which is kind of freakish. And you thought he was just a really nice guy. So this isn't really realistic. So what I want to show you next is torque and power versus RPM for a real. This isn't even Baxter's final form. No, you got to understand. This is not something normal. Under that veil of just a nice looking average Joe, that's really not what's going on here. That's a cover story. Okay, so from the graph, we can see that to maintain a constant torque at the pedals, power must increase linearly at a specific rate as a function of pedaling speed. But we know that's just not going to work in real life. And people have actually done scientific studies of this. In real life, when a cyclist pedals as hard as they can, we find a relationship that looks like this. Let's break this down. So I have two graphs here. One graph is torque versus pedaling speed. That's the one on the left. So an expert cyclist, so there's two lines here because they had like two expert cyclists for this study. And you see this linear relationship. We have torque on the vertical axis, pedaling RPM on the horizontal axis. And a cyclist produces the most torque at low pedaling rates, like 50 RPM here. And they can't maintain that torque for higher pedaling rates. Once you get up to like 150, 200 RPM, 250, you're not producing as much torque at all. And the power, unlike Baxter, it increases to a point, like they have to increase power to keep up that torque at higher pedaling rates, but humans have finite power, all right, not unlimited power. So this power drops off at higher pedaling rates. So this is data from real cyclists pedaling as hard as they can. It's like a hamster generator, but with Baxter. That's right. And I put the source here if you want to look up the paper yourself. So here we go. For a cyclist pedaling as hard as possible, they produce the most torque at slow pedaling rates, and this linearly decreases as the pedaling rate increases. Peak pedaling power for an expert cyclist is around 150 RPM. Oh, we need to watch a unicycle race. So you can see there's actually not very many videos of unicycle racing. It's apparently not that popular. Let me pull this one up. But you're gonna see how torque drops off. Unicycle race. Okay, here we go. Let me pause these tunes really quick. All right, we gotta go over here. This is also really cute, by the way. But what I want you to notice is the acceleration at the beginning is high, and then they don't accelerate that much. Like you can see they're moving, and then it seems, well, if we can watch them go, like look, their velocity, it just tops out. Like out of the blocks, they're pedaling slowly and accelerating, but now, oh, that poor guy fell off. But they reach a max speed pretty early. Oh yeah, except for the absolute animal up at the front. Oh, she's like a unique case right here. She's kind of like pulsing, it seems like. She accelerates and then built for speed. All right, these guys, they're not focused. They're not working hard enough. We need to see like a real... Whoa. Where's Baxter? I guess Baxter, I guess he didn't qualify. So in your spare time, just go back and watch that video over and over again. But what I want you to see is you can clearly see a decrease in the torque production over time. Direct correlation between helmet, aero, and speed. Yeah, it's really about the aerodynamics here. Okay, but we have a couple minutes left. Let's talk about cars. So just like a cyclist has a limited pedaling speed range over which torque and power are effectively produced. So like for a cyclist, it's 150 RPM when they're pedaling. That's when they're really producing the most power. Cars also have a limited range of engine speeds over which they produce torque and power effectively. But this is interesting because it can be very different from car to car. So here's some examples below. These are I ripped from Road and Track magazine. They have these like performance tests, and well, they tell you more than just power and torque as a function of engine speed. They actually have a lot of information. But here is on the horizontal axis, we have engine RPM. And then they show you in blue, this is the torque. And in red, this is the horsepower. And now we actually know the conversions between these two. If you have just the torque and the RPM, you could calculate the horsepower, or if you had the horsepower and the RPM, you could also calculate the torque. So they're functionally related here. But you see that this is actually, somebody mentioned Baxter. This Porsche is almost like Baxter. Let me explain. If you look at the torque, it's pretty constant for a period of time. And over that period of time, notice this, what is the power doing? Linearly increasing. Linearly increasing, just like we saw. Except, unlike Baxter, power cannot increase linearly forever. There is a limit, indeed, to the power, and so the torque drops off as well at higher RPMs. Let's look at another car. We have a 2016 Ford Mustang Shelby, and this is kind of like interesting. The torque, it kind of plateaus at some different spots. But anytime that you see that a constant torque is maintained over a range of RPMs, that is related to a linear range. That curve is trash. I don't know. Don't people really like Mustang GTs? But you have to produce more power at high RPMs to maintain the torque. Okay, let's look at another one. We're getting more and more stacked here. Look at that power. A 2015 Ferrari LaFerrari. Let's go down. And this thing is, these things are to scale, by the way. So like this one's just way taller than the others because it produces all of this horsepower. So, okay, the peak torque, it looks like that happens, I don't know, these numbers are a little too blurry for me to see. Maybe I think that's like 6,500 RPM, something like that. So it produces the sweet spot for this Ferrari in terms of torque is at a much higher RPM than that Porsche we saw earlier. Oh yeah, I think somebody said red line in the chat. We'll talk more about this, but red line is when you're looking at your RPMs on the dashboard in your vehicle. You can see the RPM. That's talking about your engine speed. As that gets faster and faster, the dial goes into this red zone. That's the red line, and that's like the fastest safe engine speed. You could start to burn things out, but that's also where you're producing the most power. Up at that high speeds, that's where the peak power of the engine is. And they should just replace the F1 car with a LaFerrari. It'd probably be less embarrassing. Oh, that's too bad. Ferrari's not doing well. But a little sneak preview. I think I mentioned, so your first project, I think I'm going to assign that roughly 2 weeks from now. You are going to design your own like torque and power curve within your group, subject to certain constraints. You can't just give it everything. And we're going to get talking about gears and stuff as well. So you're going to get to play with some of this stuff, and it'll be fun. So take away from today, Hank says, can I use mine? Oh yeah, your car's pretty sweet. No Baxter models? Well, cars all have their own DNA of how they can produce power and torque at different speeds. Just like a human on a bicycle, they have like their own DNA for that. And that's what makes cars pretty interesting. So we'll learn how to simulate how these cars perform, and that'll be good. So thank you guys for being here. This was fun. We got to learn more about Baxter and watch some unicycle racing. But that concludes our lecture for today, and I hope you guys have a great Labor Day. I'm happy you guys are here. You have a great day, Barry Bloke. Chimney Stacks, have a great Labor Day. Thank you. Jenna says, I got my homework in on time. Professor S. Oh, great. Okay, I'm glad that worked out for you, Jenna. See you, Foreign Wanderer. Have a good day, my friend. Hank says, when are we going to do that experiment? I'll have the car here until at least October. Are you talking about doing a quarter mile? So you sent me that dyno. We got the specs. We could. last track day, says Beamer. Belcut, have a great Labor Day. Predict the 8th mile time and then I'll run it. Oh. Okay, did you give me the gear ratios? I can't remember. Because I need those gear ratios. If you have an estimate of the inertia for each gear, that'll make it a little more realistic. That'll be fun though. You get out there, you do an 1/8 of a mile, and I'll see if I can predict how fast it is. Jenna, have a great Labor Day. If multiple homework submissions are made, is only the most recent submission graded? That's right. That's right. We'll just grade your most recent one, so don't worry about multiple submissions. And if there's ever a mistake, just let us know. We'll go back and fix that up. Thanks, Hank. That's really cool. That'll be fun. Have a great day, Paul. Gary says you can calculate the quarter-mile time easy from the trap speed time of okay. Okay, shouldn't be too hard. That'll be fun. Yeah, we can try to dial it in. Fun stuff. Alright, everybody. I gotta run to a meeting in a couple minutes. I hope you have a great Labor Day. I hope you enjoy your day. I hope you feel peaceful and rested. Okay, Hank, that sounds great. That sounds great. Let me know. Have a good one. All right, everybody. Blessings on your day.